bear cub entangled in a vineyard. Bird-Net and took it to hospital. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Riverside Valley vineyard, casting long shadows between the endless rows of grapevines. 23-year-old Zara Whitmore adjusted her worn baseball cap and wiped sweat from her forehead as she walked through the vineyard with her 8-month-old daughter, Luna, secured in a carrier against her chest. The baby's tiny fingers reached out, trying to catch the dancing light that filtered through the leaves above them. "Just a quick check on the bird nets, sweetheart," Zara whispered to Luna, whose bright hazel eyes sparkled with curiosity at every new sight and sound around them. The vineyard had been in Zara's family for 3 generations, but this year felt different. This year, she was doing it all alone after her husband's deployment overseas. The morning air carried the sweet scent of ripening grapes mixed with wildflowers that grew along the vineyard's edges. Luna gurgled happily, her chubby hands clapping together as a butterfly fluttered past them. Zara couldn't help but smile at her daughter's wonder at the simple beauty around them. As they reached the far section of the vineyard, Zara noticed something odd. One of the protective bird nets that stretched between the vine posts was sagging lower than it should be. The fine mesh, designed to keep birds away from the precious fruit, was twisted and pulled in an unusual way. She quickened her pace, Luna bouncing gently in the carrier with each step. "That's strange," Zara muttered, approaching the damaged net. The mesh was torn in several places, and grape clusters lay scattered on the ground below, their dark juice staining the earth. It looked like something much larger than a bird had been caught in the netting. Luna suddenly became quiet, her head turning toward a section of dense foliage near the twisted net. Her tiny eyebrows furrowed in a way that always amazed Zara. How could someone so young look so concerned? The baby's attention was fixed on something beyond the vines, something Zara couldn't yet see. Then they heard it. A soft, desperate whimpering sound that seemed to come from the shadows beneath the canopy of leaves. It wasn't the cry of any bird, Zara knew. This sound was deeper, more distressed, and it sent a chill down her spine despite the warm morning sun. Zara moved closer to the sound, her heart beginning to race. Luna's small hand pressed against her mother's chest, as if sensing the growing tension. The whimpering grew louder, more urgent, and Zara realized with growing alarm that whatever was making that sound was in serious trouble. Pushing through a cluster of low-hanging branches, Zara gasped at what she found. Tangled in the fallen bird net, barely visible beneath layers of mesh and torn grapevines, was a small bear cub. The animal couldn't have been more than a few months old, its dark fur matted with morning dew and grape juice. The net had wrapped around its body so tightly that every movement only made the entanglement worse. The cub's small black eyes looked up at Zara with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Its breathing was labored, and she could see where the thin cords of the net had cut into its fur. How long had it been trapped here? How had no one heard its cries before now? Luna made a soft cooing sound, and incredibly the bear cub's ears perked up at the gentle noise. The baby's eyes were wide with fascination rather than fear, as if she understood that the small creature needed help. Zara felt her heart breaking as she looked at the trapped animal, so young and helpless, fighting desperately to free itself from the tangle of netting. "Oh, you poor little thing," Zara whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. The cub's struggles had grown weaker, and she could see it was exhausted from fighting against the net that held it prisoner. But what could she do? This wasn't just any wild animal. This was a bear, even if it was just a baby. And somewhere nearby there was almost certainly a very protective mother bear who would not appreciate humans near her cub. Luna reached out her tiny hand toward the trapped animal, making gentle babbling sounds that seemed to calm the frightened cub. Zara stared in amazement as the baby and the bear cub looked at each other. Two innocent creatures connecting across the barriers of species and circumstance. The morning that had started so peacefully had suddenly become something much more complicated and dangerous. Zara's mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do next, all while her daughter continued to make soothing sounds to the trapped bear cub, as if she somehow knew exactly what the little animal needed to hear. Zara realized with growing terror that she and Luna were directly between the mother bear and her trapped baby. In less than a minute, they would be face to face with an angry, protective mother bear while she was trying to free the cub from the net. The trapped cub must have caught his mother's scent because he began calling out with renewed energy, his cries becoming more desperate and loud. The mother bear's head snapped up at the sound, and she began moving faster toward them, her massive paws making the ground vibrate with each step. Zara's hands shook as she worked frantically at the netting, knowing that she only had seconds before the mother bear reached them. Luna seemed to sense the danger too, but instead of crying, she leaned forward and placed both of her tiny hands on the trapped cub's head, making soft shushing sounds as if trying to calm the frightened animal. And then something happened that would change everything. The moment Luna's hands touched the bear cub's fur, the little animal became completely still. Not the stillness of fear or exhaustion, but a peaceful calm that seemed to spread through its entire body. The cub's breathing became steady and quiet, and it looked up at Luna with an expression that could only be described as adoration. But more shocking than the cub's reaction was what happened next. The approaching mother bear suddenly stopped her charge and stood perfectly still, watching the scene before her with what appeared to be confusion and curiosity rather than rage. She tilted her massive head to one side, studying the sight of the human baby gently comforting her trapped cub. Zara didn't dare move. She knelt frozen beside the net, her hands still tangled in the mesh, afraid that any sudden movement might break whatever spell had fallen over the mother bear. Luna continued to stroke the cub's fur, completely unaware of the enormous predator watching them from just 20 feet away. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by Luna's gentle cooing and the soft whisper of wind through the grapevines. 3 species, human, bear cub, and massive adult bear, locked in a moment that defied everything Zara thought she knew about the natural world. Then the mother bear did something that made Zara question her own sanity. The huge animal slowly lowered herself to the ground, lying down on her belly in a position that was completely non-threatening. She rested her massive head on her front paws and watched her cub and the human baby with patient, intelligent eyes. It was as if the mother bear understood that the humans were trying to help her baby, not harm it. But how was that possible? How could a wild animal show such trust and understanding? And how was her 8-month-old daughter able to communicate with these bears in a way that seemed almost magical? With the mother bear now lying peacefully nearby, Zara found the courage to continue working on the tangled net. Her fingers moved more steadily now, following the pattern of the mesh to find the points where it could be loosened without causing more injury to the cub. Luna kept her small hands on the bear's head, continuing her soft humming sounds that seemed to keep both bears calm and relaxed. As Zara worked, she began to notice something strange about the netting itself. The tears and tangles weren't random. They formed an almost deliberate pattern, as if the cub hadn't just wandered into the net by accident. Some sections looked like they had been chewed through, while others appeared to have been torn by claws much larger than the cub's small paws. "This doesn't make sense," Zara whispered to herself, examining the damage more closely. The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but she remained in her peaceful position, watching everything with those remarkably intelligent eyes. Luna suddenly made a different sound. Not her usual cooing, but a series of short rhythmic chirps that sounded almost like she was trying to mimic bird calls. The bear cub responded immediately with similar sounds, creating what could only be described as a conversation between baby and animal. Zara stared in amazement as her daughter and the bear cub seemed to be actually talking to each other. But the most shocking moment came when the mother bear lifted her massive head and added her own voice to their conversation. She made a series of low, gentle rumbles that were completely different from the aggressive sounds Zara had heard earlier. It was as if all three of them, Luna, the cub, and the mother bear, were participating in some kind of discussion that Zara couldn't understand. As this extraordinary exchange continued, Zara managed to free one of the cub's front paws from the netting. The small bear immediately flexed its freed limb and looked up at her with what seemed like gratitude. But instead of trying to struggle free from the remaining tangles, the cub remained perfectly still, as if it understood that Zara needed to work carefully to avoid causing more injury. "You're being so brave, little one," Zara said softly, and was surprised when the cub turned its head toward her voice, tilting it in a way that reminded her exactly of how Luna listened when spoken to. The similarity was so striking that it made her wonder if there was something more going on here than just a simple rescue. As she continued working on the net, Zara began to piece together what might have happened. The pattern of damage suggested that the mother bear had tried to free her cub herself, using her claws and teeth to tear at the netting. But instead of freeing the baby, her efforts had only made the entanglement worse, pulling the mesh tighter around the small body. "You tried to save your baby, didn't you?" Zara said to the mother bear, who responded with a soft woof of breath that sounded almost like acknowledgement. The huge animal's eyes held an expression of sadness and frustration that was remarkably human-like. Luna suddenly became very excited, bouncing slightly in her carrier and making rapid chirping sounds to the bear cub. The little animal responded with equal enthusiasm, and both babies seemed to be sharing some kind of joy that the adults couldn't understand. But their excitement was infectious, and even the mother bear's expression seemed to brighten as she watched the interaction between the two youngsters. Then something happened that made Zara's hands freeze in the middle of untangling another section of net. Luna reached into the small bag that hung from her carrier, a bag that contained her favorite toys and snacks, and pulled out a small soft stuffed bear that Zara's mother had given her. The baby held the toy out toward the trapped cub, offering it as if she somehow understood that the frightened animal needed comfort. The bear cub's reaction was immediate and profound. It stretched its neck toward the stuffed toy, sniffing it carefully before gently touching it with its nose. Then, incredibly, the cub began to make soft purring sounds, a noise that Zara had never heard a bear make before. The mother bear lifted her head higher, watching this exchange with obvious fascination. But what happened next defied all explanation. As the bear cub nuzzled Luna's stuffed toy, the remaining tangles in the net seemed to loosen on their own. Zara watched in disbelief as sections of mesh that had been impossibly tight just moments before began to fall away from the cub's body. Within minutes, the little animal was completely free from the netting that had held it prisoner. The freed cub immediately scrambled to its feet, shaking itself to remove the last bits of mesh from its fur. But instead of running to its mother, it stayed close to Luna, looking up at the human baby with obvious affection. The stuffed bear toy remained clutched in Luna's small hands, but she held it where the cub could continue to nuzzle it. Zara sat back on her heels, trying to process what she had just witnessed. The net's sudden loosening couldn't be explained by anything she had done. It was as if Luna's act of kindness in offering the toy had somehow triggered the cub's freedom. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The mother bear slowly rose to her feet, and for a moment Zara's fear returned. The massive animal was now standing at full height again, towering over them with her incredible size and power. But instead of aggression, the bear's posture conveyed something entirely different. She seemed to be waiting for something, watching the interaction between her cub and the human baby with patient attention. Luna suddenly let go of her stuffed toy, allowing it to fall to the ground near the bear cub. The little animal immediately picked it up in its mouth, holding it gently but possessively. Then something even more extraordinary happened. The cub walked over to Luna's carrier and carefully placed the toy at the baby's feet, as if returning a precious gift. But Luna wasn't finished with her surprises. She reached into her bag again and this time pulled out a small container of the fruit snacks that Zara always carried for her. The baby fumbled with the lid for a moment before managing to open it, then held out one of the colorful gummy pieces toward the bear cub. "Luna, no," Zara started to say, worried about the baby feeding wild animals, but she stopped when she saw the mother bear's reaction. The huge animal had moved closer, close enough that Zara could have reached out and touched her massive paw. But there was no threat in her posture, only curiosity and what seemed like approval of her cub's interaction with the human baby. The bear cub delicately took the fruit snack from Luna's fingers, its small teeth barely brushing against her skin. It chewed the treat thoughtfully, then made happy chirping sounds that made Luna clap her hands with delight. The two babies seemed to be celebrating together, sharing a moment of pure joy that transcended species barriers. As Zara watched this incredible scene unfold, she began to notice other strange details that she had missed before. The area around the damaged net was scattered with unusual marks in the soft earth. Not just bear tracks, but what looked like symbols or patterns that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. Some of the marks looked almost like the drawings that Luna made when Zara gave her crayons and paper, simple but purposeful shapes that suggested intention rather than random scratching. "What is this place?" Zara whispered to herself, looking around the vineyard with new eyes. She had walked these same paths hundreds of times throughout her life, but now everything seemed different, charged with some kind of energy or significance that she had never noticed before. The mother bear suddenly turned her attention away from the babies and looked directly at Zara with those remarkably intelligent eyes. For a long moment, the two mothers, one human, one bear, regarded each other in silence. Then the massive animal did something that made Zara's breath catch in her throat. The mother bear slowly lowered her great head until it was almost touching the ground in what could only be described as a boo. It was a gesture of respect and gratitude so clear and deliberate that there could be no mistaking its meaning. The huge animal was thanking her for helping to free her cub. Tears began streaming down Zara's face as the full impact of what was happening hit her. This wasn't just a lucky encounter or a simple animal rescue. Something profound and mysterious was taking place here in her family's vineyard. Something that involved her daughter's unexplained ability to communicate with wild animals. But even as she tried to process these thoughts, Zara became aware of new sounds coming from the forest beyond the vineyard. More bear calls, but these were different from the ones she had heard earlier. These sounds carried notes of excitement and anticipation, as if other animals were responding to some kind of signal or invitation. The mother bear's head snapped up at the new sounds, and she responded with a series of complex calls that seemed to carry detailed information. Within moments, Zara could hear movement in the forest. Not just one or two animals, but what sounded like an entire group approaching through the trees. Luna seemed to sense the approaching visitors as well. She began bouncing excitedly in her carrier, making her chirping sounds with renewed enthusiasm. The bear cub responded by standing on its hind legs and adding its own voice to what was becoming a chorus of animal communication. "Oh my God," Zara breathed, realizing what was about to happen. Whatever was occurring here wasn't limited to just one mother bear and her cub. Other animals were coming, drawn by some kind of call or signal that she couldn't understand, but that Luna and the bears seemed to comprehend perfectly. As the sounds of approaching animals grew closer, Zara had to make a decision. She could try to leave with Luna before whatever was coming reached them, or she could stay and witness what promised to be an even more extraordinary encounter. Looking down at her daughter, who was clearly excited rather than frightened by the approaching sounds, Zara knew she couldn't leave now. Something important was happening here, something that involved her daughter in ways she didn't yet understand. And despite her fear, she knew she had to see where this incredible morning would lead them next. The first to emerge from the forest wasn't another bear, as Zara had expected. Instead, a family of deer stepped delicately into the clearing at the edge of the vineyard. The doe moved with cautious grace, followed by two spotted fawns who couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. But what struck Zara as completely impossible was their behavior. Instead of fleeing at the sight of humans and bears, they approached with obvious curiosity and calm. Luna's reaction was immediate and joyful. She began making a completely new set of sounds, soft, melodic tones that seemed to mimic the gentle bleating calls that deer make to their young. The fawns responded instantly, their spotted ears perking up as they trotted closer to the baby's carrier. The mother bear watched this interaction with what appeared to be satisfaction, as if she had expected exactly this response. Her cub, meanwhile, bounded over to greet the deer family with playful energy, the stuffed toy still clutched in its mouth. The scene was so surreal that Zara wondered if she might be hallucinating from stress and shock. But the arrivals weren't finished. A red fox emerged from a different section of the forest, its bright coat gleaming in the morning sunlight. Behind it came a family of raccoons, their masked faces alert and interested as they surveyed the gathering. Within minutes, the edge of the vineyard was populated with more wild animals than Zara had ever seen in one place, and all of them were behaving in ways that defied everything she knew about wildlife. None of the animals showed any fear of each other or of the humans. The natural predator-prey relationships that should have sent deer fleeing from bears and foxes seemed completely suspended. Instead, all the creatures appeared to be drawn by the same invisible force that had brought the mother bear to her cub. Luna was in a state of pure ecstasy. She made different sounds for each type of animal. Chirps for the birds that had begun landing in the nearby grapevines, clicks for the raccoons, and soft whistles for the fox. Each animal responded to her calls as if they were having actual conversations, creating a symphony of interspecies communication that left Zara speechless. But the most shocking moment came when an elderly man emerged from the forest behind the gathered animals. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and weathered features that spoke of decades spent outdoors. What made Zara's heart nearly stop was that he seemed completely at ease among the wild creatures, walking through them as if he were just another member of their unusual gathering. "Don't be afraid," the man said in a gentle voice as he approached. "My name is Marcus Clearwater, and I've been waiting for this day for a very long time." Zara instinctively pulled Luna's carrier closer to her chest, her maternal instincts finally overriding her fascination with the extraordinary events unfolding around them. "Who are you? How did you know to come here?" Marcus smiled, his eyes crinkling with warmth and something that looked like relief. "I'm what some people call a wildlife researcher, though my work goes far beyond what most scientists would accept as possible. I've been studying families like yours for over 30 years, waiting for a child to be born with Luna's particular gifts." "What do you mean, families like mine?" Zara demanded, though part of her already dreaded the answer. Luna continued to babble happily to the animals, completely unaware of her mother's growing anxiety. "Your grandmother, Elena Whitmore, was one of the most gifted animal communicators I ever encountered," Marcus explained, settling himself cross-legged on the ground in a way that immediately put the surrounding animals at ease. "She could speak with any creature, wild or domestic, as easily as you and I are speaking now. She helped me understand that this ability runs in certain bloodlines, passed down through generations, though it often skips one or more generations before manifesting again." Zara's mind reeled as memories suddenly clicked into place. Her grandmother Elena, who had died when Zara was just 12, had always seemed to have an uncanny ability with animals. The vineyard's workers used to joke that she could calm any wild creature just by talking to it. Zara had always assumed it was just natural charisma, but now, "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she said it, she was watching her 8-month-old daughter conduct what could only be described as a conversation with a fox kit that had wandered close to her carrier. "Your daughter is exhibiting the gift at a remarkably young age," Marcus continued, his voice filled with excitement and wonder. "Most children with this ability don't begin showing signs until they're at least 2 or 3 years old. But Luna—" He paused, watching as the baby somehow convinced a cautious rabbit to approach and accept gentle pets from her tiny fingers. "Luna is already more advanced than her grandmother was at age 5. The bear cub, not to be outdone by the other animals, climbed carefully onto Zara's lap and settled there as if it belonged, still clutching Luna's stuffed toy. The mother bear moved closer as well, positioning herself protectively behind Zara and Luna, creating a living wall of fur and muscle that somehow felt more comforting than threatening. "But why now?" Zara asked, struggling to accept what she was being told. "Why did all these animals come here today?" Marcus's expression grew more serious. "Because something is wrong in the forest, something that's been building for months. The animals have been trying to communicate their distress, but humans have lost the ability to understand them. They've been waiting for someone like Luna to emerge, someone who could bridge the gap between their world and ours." As if summoned by his words, a great horned owl swooped down from the canopy above, landing on a fence post near the gathering. The massive bird fixed its piercing golden eyes on Luna and began making a series of complex hooting sounds. Luna listened intently, her small face serious with concentration, before responding with her own series of calls that sounded remarkably similar to the owl's communication. "She's telling the owl that she understands," Marcus translated, his voice filled with awe. "Luna is promising that she'll help them find a solution to whatever is threatening their home." "But she's just a baby," Zara protested. "She can't even walk yet, let alone solve environmental problems." "Age doesn't matter when it comes to this gift," Marcus explained patiently. "The animals don't see Luna as a helpless infant. They see her as a bridge between worlds, someone who can understand both human and animal perspectives. They've been drawn here because they sense that she might be their only hope." The gathering of animals seemed to grow even more diverse as Marcus spoke. A family of skunks emerged from the underbrush, followed by several possums and what appeared to be a young mountain lion that should have sent every other creature fleeing in terror. Instead, the big cat settled peacefully at the edge of the group, adding its own voice to the growing chorus of animal sounds. Luna was completely in her element, making different vocalizations for each species, and apparently receiving detailed responses. Her small hands gestured expressively as she spoke, and Zara could see intelligence and purpose in her daughter's actions that went far beyond normal infant behavior. "There's something else you need to know," Marcus said, his tone becoming more urgent. "The reason the bear cub was trapped in your netting, the reason all these animals have gathered here today, it's not coincidence. Someone or something has been deliberately setting traps throughout this forest, using methods that specifically target young animals." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, deliberately?" "Ah, I've been tracking a pattern of incidents over the past 6 months," Marcus explained, pulling a worn notebook from his jacket pocket. "Young animals trapped in nets, snares hidden along game trails, water sources contaminated in ways that primarily affect juvenile creatures. Someone is systematically targeting the next generation of forest wildlife." The mother bear's reaction to Marcus's words was immediate and intense. She rose to her full height and let out a roar that conveyed both rage and grief, a sound that made several of the smaller animals huddle closer together for comfort. The other adult animals in the gathering responded with their own calls of distress, creating a cacophony of voices that spoke of shared trauma and loss. Luna's response to this outpouring of animal grief was heartbreaking. Tears began streaming down her small face as she reached out toward the distressed creatures, making soft, comforting sounds that seemed to wrap around each animal like a gentle embrace. One by one, the adult animals quieted their cries, drawn to the healing energy that seemed to radiate from the human baby. "She feels their pain," Marcus whispered in amazement. "Not just their individual suffering, but the collective trauma of their entire community. I've never seen empathic abilities this strong in someone so young." But Luna wasn't content to just comfort the grieving animals. She began making a new series of sounds, more complex and purposeful than anything she had vocalized before. The animals listened intently, their body language shifting from grief to something that looked remarkably like hope and determination. "What is she telling them?" Zara asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. Marcus listened carefully to Luna's vocalizations and the animals' responses before answering. "She's making them a promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's telling them that she'll help them stop whoever is hurting their babies. She's promising to use her gift to protect them and their families." The implications of what Marcus was saying hit Zara like a physical blow. Her infant daughter was somehow committing herself to a mission that could put them both in serious danger. But as she looked around at the faces of the gathered animals, faces filled with hope and trust as they looked at Luna, she realized that they might not have a choice. The forest community had chosen her daughter as their champion, and Luna had accepted that responsibility with the fearless certainty that only a child could possess. The question now was whether Zara was brave enough to support her daughter in what promised to be an extraordinary and dangerous journey. As if sensing her mother's internal struggle, Luna reached up and placed one tiny hand on Zara's cheek. The baby's eyes held a depth of understanding that seemed impossible for someone so young, but the message was clear. They were in this together, whatever came next. The bear cub in Zara's lap nuzzled closer to Luna, while the mother bear's massive paw came to rest gently on Zara's shoulder. Around them, the gathering of animals waited patiently for the human mother to make her decision. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the vineyard and illuminating a scene that would have been dismissed as fantasy just hours earlier. But now, faced with undeniable evidence of her daughter's remarkable abilities and the desperate need of the forest community, Zara knew there was only one choice she could make. Whatever dangers lay ahead, she would stand by Luna's side and help her fulfill the promise she had made to their new animal friends. "All right," Zara said softly, her voice growing stronger with each word. tell me what we need to do." Marcus's face lit up with relief and gratitude, but before he could respond, Luna made a series of urgent chirping sounds that caused immediate alarm among the gathered animals. The deer lifted their heads high, ears swiveling toward the forest, while the mother bear rose to her feet with a low growl rumbling in her chest. Even the smaller creatures like the raccoons and rabbits seemed to sense some approaching danger. "What's wrong?" Zara asked, instinctively pulling Luna's carrier closer to her body. The bear at the cub in her lap whimpered and pressed against her, seeking comfort and protection. Marcus was already on his feet, his weathered face tense with concern. "Luna's picking up something the rest of us can't sense yet. The animals are responding to her warning." He pulled out what looked like a small device from his pocket, checking its display with growing alarm. "My motion sensors are showing movement about half a mile away. Something large, moving deliberately through the forest toward us." The owl swooped down from its perch and landed directly on Marcus's shoulder, hooting urgent information into his ear. As Marcus listened, his expression grew darker and more worried. "It's not animals moving toward us," he translated grimly. "According to Athena here, it's humans. At least 3 of them, and they're carrying equipment. They're moving in a coordinated pattern, like they're conducting some kind of search." Zara felt her blood run cold. "Search for what?" "For whoever freed the bear cub," Marcus replied, his voice tight with tension. "Athena says they've been monitoring the trap sites with hidden cameras. They know someone interfered with their trap, and they're coming to investigate." The implications hit Zara like a punch to the gut. Whoever was systematically targeting young forest animals wasn't just setting random traps. They were running an organized operation with surveillance and security measures. And now they knew that someone had discovered their activities. Luna suddenly began making frantic vocalizations, her small hands pointing toward different sections of the forest. The animals responded immediately, with several species beginning to move in seemingly coordinated patterns. The deer family bounded toward the eastern edge of the vineyard, while the fox and raccoon scattered toward the west. Even the mountain lion rose smoothly to its feet and padded silently toward the north. "She's organizing them," Marcus said in amazement. "Luna is directing an evacuation, telling each group which direction to go to avoid the approaching humans." But the mother bear didn't follow the other animals. Instead, she moved to position herself directly between the approaching threat and the humans, her massive body creating a living shield. Her cub jumped down from Zara's lap and took position beside its mother, the stuffed toy still clutched protectively in its mouth. "We need to get Luna out of here," Zara said, starting to stand, but Marcus caught her arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "Luna's still communicating with them. She's not giving evacuation orders anymore. She's asking for something else." Zara looked down at her daughter, who was making a complex series of sounds while staring intently at the mother bear. The huge animal listened carefully, then responded with deep, rumbling vocalizations that seemed to carry weight and authority. "What are they saying?" Zara demanded, her fear growing as the sounds of approaching humans became audible even to her ordinary hearing. Marcus listened intently to the exchange before his eyes widened in shock. "Luna is asking the bears to help us capture evidence of who's behind the traps. She's not running away. She's planning to confront them." "Absolutely not," Zara exclaimed. But Luna turned to look at her with those remarkably mature eyes, and made a soft sound that somehow conveyed both determination and reassurance. The baby reached out and patted her mother's hand, as if trying to comfort her fears. "Zara, I think Luna knows something we don't," Marcus said quietly. "Her communication with the animals is more advanced than anything I've ever encountered. If she believes this is the right course of action, We should at least hear what she has in mind." The mother bear moved closer to Zara, gently nuzzling her shoulder before settling down beside her in a protective position. The massive animal's presence was both comforting and terrifying, knowing that this powerful creature trusted Luna's judgment enough to stay and fight rather than flee with her cub. Luna began a new series of vocalizations, this time directed at both Marcus and Zara. Her sounds were softer, more melodic, and they seemed to carry layers of meaning that went beyond simple communication. As she spoke, Zara found herself understanding concepts and ideas that shouldn't have been possible to convey through baby sounds. The plan that Luna was proposing was both brilliant and dangerous. She wanted to use her unique abilities to coordinate the animals in gathering evidence of the systematic trapping operation. The creatures could access areas that humans couldn't reach, observe from positions that would be invisible to the trappers, and document the full scope of what was happening in the forest. But more than that, Luna somehow sensed that the approaching humans weren't the ones in charge of the operation. They were just workers, following orders from someone else. If they could observe these people without being detected, they might be able to trace the operation back to its source. "She wants to hide and watch them," Marcus translated, his voice filled with admiration for the baby's strategic thinking. "Luna believes we can learn more by staying hidden than by running away." The sound of human voices was getting closer now, close enough that Zara could make out individual words. The voices were male, professional, and carried the tone of people conducting serious business rather than casual hikers or researchers. "The trap was definitely tampered with," one voice said clearly. Someone knew exactly how to free the animal without damaging the net mechanism. This wasn't random. Whoever did this has experience with wildlife rescue. "Did the cameras pick up anything useful?" another voice asked. "Partial footage of a woman with a baby carrier, but the angle was wrong to get a clear face shot. The timestamp shows it happened about 2 hours ago, so they can't be far." Zara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the approaching men would hear it. These people had been watching the trap site, recording everything that happened. They had footage of her and Luna, which meant they could potentially identify them and track them down. But Luna seemed completely calm, continuing to make soft sounds to the animals around them. Following her directions, the mother bear had positioned herself behind a cluster of grapevines where her dark fur would blend into the shadows. The bear cub had found a hiding spot among the fallen leaves, still clutching the stuffed toy but keeping perfectly still. Marcus had produced a small camera of his own, setting it up with quick, practiced movements to record whatever was about to happen. Zara crouched behind the same vine cluster as the mother bear, Luna's carrier pressed close to her chest, both of them breathing as quietly as possible. The first man to enter the clearing was tall and heavy-set, wearing expensive outdoor gear that looked more suited to a corporate retreat than serious fieldwork. He carried a tablet device and was clearly in charge of the other 2 men who followed him. All 3 wore matching jackets with a logo that Zara couldn't quite make out from her hiding position. "The damage pattern suggests the animal was freed by someone with veterinary training," the leader said, examining the tangled net that still lay on the ground. This wasn't some random Good Samaritan. This was professional work. "Should we expand the search perimeter?" one of his companions asked. "Not yet. First, I want to know how they found this specific trap. We've got 47 active sites scattered across 3 counties, and they went straight to this one. That's not coincidence. 47 active sites." Zara felt sick as the scope of the operation became clear. This wasn't just local animal cruelty. This was a massive, coordinated effort targeting wildlife across a huge area. Luna made the softest possible sound, barely audible even to Zara, who was holding her. But somehow, that tiny noise reached the ears of animals throughout the forest. Within moments, birds began landing in trees around the clearing, positioning themselves where they could observe and record everything happening below. The lead man noticed the unusual bird activity immediately. "That's interesting," he said, pulling out binoculars to scan the surrounding trees. "High concentration of avian surveillance. Someone's been training local wildlife to act as lookouts." "Training wildlife?" One of his companions scoffed. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," the leader replied grimly. "Improbable, but not impossible. There are maybe a dozen people in North America with that level of animal communication ability. If one of them has discovered our operation—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his tone conveyed the seriousness of the threat he perceived. Marcus caught Zara's eye and mouthed the words, "He knows about people like Luna." The implications were terrifying. These people weren't just wildlife poachers or casual criminals. They were operating with knowledge of abilities like Luna's, which suggested a level of organization and resources that went far beyond anything Zara had imagined. The leader was now examining the ground around the net with intense focus, following tracks and disturbances that told the story of the morning's events. His trained eye was picking up details that revealed far more than Zara was comfortable with. Adult female, approximately 120 pounds, wearing hiking boots size 7, he announced to his team. Infant in carrier based on the depth of her footprints. She spent at least 20 minutes working on the net, suggesting emotional investment rather than simple opportunity. He moved to a different section of the clearing, kneeling to examine the marks in the soft soil. Adult female black bear, approximately 200 pounds, with a cub. They approached from the northeast and remained in the area for an extended period. No signs of aggression or conflict between human and bear subjects. Zara's amazement at his tracking skills was overshadowed by growing terror as she realized how much information he was gathering about their morning encounter. This man was a professional tracker, possibly military or law enforcement trained, and he was reading the scene like an open book. But then he found something that made him stop completely. Kneeling beside one of the strange symbols that Zara had noticed earlier, the man's entire demeanor changed. His professional confidence was replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Sir?" one of his companions asked, noticing the change in his leader's behavior. "Get command on the radio," the man said quietly, his voice tight with tension. "Tell them we have a Code 7 situation." "Code 7? The second man's voice carried sudden alarm. "Are you sure?" "These marks," the leader said, pointing to the symbols in the earth. "They're not random. They're communication symbols used by subjects with level 5 capabilities or higher. We're not dealing with an ordinary wildlife rescuer. We're dealing with someone who can coordinate large-scale animal responses." Luna chose that moment to make another soft sound, and the response from the surrounding forest was immediate and overwhelming. Birds filled the air, circling the clearing in complex patterns. Small mammals emerged from hiding places, positioning themselves around the perimeter. Even insects seemed to respond, creating a buzzing symphony that rose and fell in obvious patterns. The three men found themselves surrounded by a living wall of wildlife, all coordinated by the sounds coming from Luna's hiding place. The leader reached for something on his belt. A weapon, Zara realized with horror. But before he could draw it, the mother bear stepped out from behind the grapevines. The massive animal moved with deliberate calm, positioning herself between the armed men and Luna's hiding spot. She didn't growl or show aggression, but her presence was so commanding that all three men froze in place. The bear's intelligence was clearly visible in her eyes as she assessed the threat and made her own decision about how to respond. "Nobody move," the leader whispered to his team. "We're in the middle of a coordinated animal response. Any aggressive action on our part could trigger a full-scale attack." But Luna wasn't finished demonstrating her abilities. Her next series of vocalizations brought the mountain lion out of the forest, followed by what appeared to be an entire pack of coyotes. Within minutes, the three men were surrounded by more predators than they had probably ever seen in one place, all calm and controlled, but clearly ready to act if necessary. "This is impossible," one of the men breathed. "How is someone controlling all these animals?" The leader was staring directly at the grapevine cluster where Zara and Luna were hidden. His tracking skills had led him to the right location, and Zara could see the moment when he spotted movement in the shadows. His eyes widened as he realized that the source of the animal coordination was coming from their hiding place. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice carrying authority despite his obvious nervousness about the surrounding wildlife. "We know you're there, and we know what you can do. Let's talk about this like civilized people." Zara looked down at Luna, who was watching the whole scene with alert, intelligent eyes. The baby made a soft questioning sound, as if asking her mother what they should do next. Around them, dozens of wild animals waited for direction from their unlikely human leader. The moment of decision had arrived. They could continue hiding and hope the men would eventually leave, or they could step out and confront whatever organization was behind the systematic targeting of forest wildlife. Either choice carried enormous risks, but as Zara looked at the faces of the animals who had put their trust in Luna, she knew what her daughter's answer would be. Luna was not a child who backed down from challenges or abandoned those who needed her help, and despite her fear, Zara realized that she wasn't willing to abandon Luna's mission either. The forest community was depending on them, and they had already come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, Zara slowly stood up from behind the grapevines, Luna's carrier secured against her chest. The three men's expressions shifted from wariness to complete shock as they saw the source of the coordinated animal response, not a trained adult operative, but a young mother with an infant who couldn't even walk yet. "You want to talk?" Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then start by explaining why you're systematically trapping baby animals across 3 counties. The lead operative's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally what looked like reluctant respect. He slowly raised his hands to show they were empty, a gesture that seemed to calm some of the surrounding animals, though they remained in their protective positions around the clearing. "My name is Agent David Chen," he said carefully, his eyes never leaving Luna's carrier. "I work for a government division that most people don't know exists. We monitor individuals with unusual abilities to ensure they don't pose a threat to public safety." "Government," Zara demanded, her voice rising with anger. "The government is torturing baby animals." "We're not torturing anything," Chen replied firmly. "The traps are designed to contain, not harm. We've been studying the correlation between individuals with animal communication abilities and the behavioral changes in local wildlife populations. Your daughter's emergence triggered a significant spike in coordinated animal activity across this entire region." Marcus stepped out from his own hiding place, his notebook clutched in his hand, and his face flushed with rage. "You've been using innocent animals as bait to lure out gifted individuals? That's monstrous." Agent Chen's attention shifted to Marcus with obvious recognition. "Doctor Marcus Clearwater, we've been trying to locate you for 6 months. Your unauthorized research into genetic markers for animal communication abilities has been flagged as a potential security risk." "Security risk?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "I've been trying to protect these families from people like you?" But Luna suddenly made a sharp, urgent sound that caused immediate alarm among all the animals. The mother bear's ears flattened against her head, and she let out a low, warning growl that made all three operatives take a step backward. Even the birds in the surrounding trees began making agitated calls. "What's she sensing now?" Zara asked Marcus, her maternal instincts screaming that something new and dangerous was approaching. Marcus listened to Luna's vocalizations with growing concern. "She's detecting something the animals consider an even greater threat than these agents, something that's making the entire forest community panic." Agent Chen was speaking rapidly into a radio device, his professional composure cracking as he received whatever information was coming through his earpiece. "Command, we have a code red situation developing. The Hartwell team is approaching our location with active containment equipment." "Who's the Hartwell team?" Zara demanded, but the terror in Chen's voice was answer enough. "They're not government," Chen said grimly. "They're a private military contractor that specializes in acquiring individuals with exceptional abilities. If they're here, it means someone with very deep pockets wants your daughter." The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. Luna wasn't just a child with unusual gifts. She was apparently valuable enough that someone was willing to hire military contractors to capture her. The systematic animal trapping hadn't been a government monitoring operation. It had been bait to draw Luna out into the open. "You use those baby animals as bait," she said, her voice cold with fury. "You knew it would force Luna to reveal herself when she tried to help them." "The trapping operation wasn't ours," Chen admitted, his professionalism giving way to something that looked like genuine regret. "We've been tracking the Hartwell Corporation's activities, trying to stay one step ahead of them. When they started targeting this area, we knew they had identified a high-value subject." Luna made another series of urgent sounds, and the response from the surrounding animals was immediate and coordinated. The mountain lion disappeared into the forest, followed by the coyotes and most of the smaller mammals. The birds took flight in formation, spreading out across the sky in what was clearly a reconnaissance pattern. "She's organizing a defensive network," Marcus said in amazement. "Luna is coordinating every animal in this forest to monitor and report on the approaching threat." But Agent Chen was focused on a different concern. "How many animals can she coordinate simultaneously?" he asked urgently. "Because if the Hartwell team has brought the tranquilizer equipment designed for large-scale animal control, we need to know the scope of what we're dealing with." Before anyone could answer, the sound of helicopters became audible in the distance. Not just one aircraft, but multiple machines approaching from different directions. The sound grew louder quickly, suggesting they were military-grade helicopters moving at high speed. "They're coming from 3 directions," Chen said, monitoring his radio communications. 6 aircraft total, with full tactical teams and containment specialists. Zara felt her world tilting as the reality of their situation became clear. Her baby daughter was the target of a military-style operation involving helicopters, tactical teams, and specialized equipment. The peaceful morning in the vineyard had become a nightmare that threatened to tear Luna away from her forever. But Luna herself seemed remarkably calm, continuing to make soft vocalizations that were answered by animal calls from throughout the forest. Whatever she was coordinating was happening on a scale that dwarfed anything they had witnessed so far. "There's something else you need to know," Agent Chen said, his voice tight with urgency. "The Hartwell Corporation isn't just collecting gifted individuals, they're studying them. Their research facilities are designed to enhance and weaponize natural abilities like your daughter's." "Weaponize?" Marcus demanded. "What do you mean?" Imagine someone with Luna's abilities but trained to coordinate attacks rather than rescues. Picture military applications of large-scale animal control or biological warfare using coordinated insect populations. The potential applications are... Chen shuddered. That's why my agency exists, to prevent these abilities from falling into the wrong hands. The helicopter sounds were getting much closer now, and Zara could see the first aircraft appearing over the treetops. It was a large, black helicopter that looked more like military equipment than anything civilian. As she watched, 2 more helicopters became visible, approaching from different angles to surround the vineyard. Luna suddenly made a sound unlike anything she had produced before. A complex, layered vocalization that seemed to carry multiple frequencies and tones simultaneously. The effect on the surrounding environment was immediate and startling. Every animal within hearing range responded at once. Birds filled the sky in numbers that blocked out the sun, creating a living cloud that surrounded the approaching helicopters. From the forest came the sounds of large animals moving. Not just a few bears or deer, but what sounded like entire herds responding to Luna's call. "My God," Chen breathed, staring at the spectacle unfolding around them. She's not just communicating with local animals, she's calling everything within a 5-mile radius. The helicopters found themselves flying through dense clouds of birds that made navigation extremely difficult. The pilots were clearly struggling to maintain control as thousands of creatures filled the airspace around their aircraft. One helicopter was forced to gain altitude rapidly to avoid a collision with a massive flock of geese that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But the most shocking moment came when the forest itself seemed to come alive. Bears, deer, elk, and countless smaller animals began emerging from the trees, all moving in coordinated patterns that created a living barrier around the vineyard. The sight was so overwhelming that even Agent Chen's professional composure cracked completely. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No one has ever demonstrated this level of coordination. Luna isn't just communicating with animals. She's conducting them like a symphony orchestra." The mother bear moved closer to Zara, positioning herself protectively while her cub climbed back into Zara's lap, still clutching the stuffed toy. The massive animal's presence was comforting, but Zara knew that even with all these animals protecting them, they were still outnumbered and outgunned by the approaching military force. "There has to be somewhere we can go," Zara said desperately. "Some way to get Luna to safety." Marcus was already moving, gathering equipment and checking escape routes. "There's an old mining tunnel system about half a mile north of here. If we can reach it, the underground passages could provide cover from the helicopters." But Agent Chen shook his head grimly. "The Hartwell Corporation has been planning this operation for weeks. They'll have ground teams positioned at every possible escape route. Your only chance is if Luna's animal coordination can create enough chaos to disrupt their tactical advantage." As if responding to his words, Luna made another complex vocalization, and the animal response escalated to an entirely new level. The helicopters found themselves not just dealing with birds, but with coordinated harassment from every flying creature in the region. Bats that should have been sleeping during daylight hours poured out of caves and hollow trees, adding to the airborne chaos. On the ground, the assembled animals began moving in patterns that created natural barriers and obstacles, making it impossible for any ground teams to approach through the forest. Fallen trees appeared across paths that had been clear moments before, dragged into position by coordinated groups of animals working together. "She's not just defending this location," Marcus realized with growing amazement. "Luna is transforming the entire forest into a fortress. Every animal within miles is working together to create an impenetrable defensive network." One of the helicopters managed to break through the bird interference, and land in a clearing about 200 yards away. Zara could see armed figures in tactical gear emerging from the aircraft, but their progress toward the vineyard was immediately blocked by what appeared to be an organized wall of forest animals. "The tranquilizer equipment won't work," Agent Chen said, monitoring radio communications from the tactical teams. "They designed their systems to handle normal animal behavior, not coordinated resistance on this scale." But Luna wasn't finished demonstrating her abilities. Her next vocalization brought a response that made everyone in the clearing, including the government agents, stare in absolute shock. From the deepest parts of the forest came a sound that belonged to an earlier age, the howl of wolves. Not just one or two animals, but an entire pack, and then another and another. The howling grew until it seemed like every wolf within 50 miles was announcing their presence and their allegiance to the human baby who had called them. "That's impossible," Chen breathed. "There haven't been wild wolf packs in this region for over 70 years. But Marcus was smiling despite the danger surrounding them. "Luna isn't just coordinating the animals that live here now," he said with wonder in his voice. "She's calling back the ones that used to live here, the ones that have been hiding in the deepest wilderness areas, waiting for someone who could speak their language." The approaching tactical teams found themselves facing not just the animals they had expected, but creatures that had been legendary in this region for generations. The psychological impact of hearing wolf howls in an area where wolves were supposed to be extinct was clearly affecting the military contractors' morale. Luna made one more sound, softer than the others but somehow more powerful. This time, the response came from above, as a golden eagle, a bird that definitely shouldn't have been in this region, circled overhead before landing on a fence post near the baby's carrier. The magnificent bird fixed its piercing gaze on Agent Chen and his team, as if taking their measure. Then it turned to look at Luna, who made a soft chirping sound that the eagle answered with a series of sharp calls. "She's asking for a report," Marcus translated in amazement. "Luna is using the eagle as an aerial reconnaissance scout to coordinate the defense of the entire area." The tactical situation had shifted completely. What should have been a simple extraction operation had become a standoff between military contractors and what could only be described as an army of coordinated wildlife. The helicopters couldn't land safely. The ground teams couldn't advance through the forest. And the entire operation was being directed by an 8-month-old human baby. But Zara knew that this situation couldn't last forever. Eventually, the Hartwell Corporation would bring in heavier equipment or find some other way to overcome Luna's animal defenders. They needed a plan that went beyond just defensive measures. "Agent Chen," she said, her voice carrying new determination, "you said your agency exists to protect people like Luna from falling into the wrong hands. If that's true, then help us. Help us find a way to stop the Hartwell Corporation permanently, not just for today." Chen looked at her with surprise, then at Luna, who was continuing to coordinate the defensive network with calm efficiency, despite the chaos surrounding them. "You're talking about going on the offensive against a private military corporation with unlimited resources." "I'm talking about protecting my daughter and every other gifted child they might target," Zara replied firmly. "Luna has shown us what's possible when someone with her abilities chooses to help rather than hide. Maybe it's time to take that fight directly to the people who want to weaponize children." The golden eagle let out a sharp cry that seemed to echo Zara's determination, while the mother bear rose to her full height and added her own roar of agreement. Around the clearing, the assembled animal defenders seemed to sense that their human allies were preparing for something bigger than just escape. Luna looked up at her mother with those remarkably mature eyes and made a soft sound that somehow conveyed both agreement and encouragement. The baby, who had started the morning, simply trying to help a trapped bear cub, was ready to take on an organization that threatened children like herself across the entire country. The helicopters continued to circle overhead, unable to penetrate the defensive screen that Luna had created, while their pilots radioed increasingly desperate requests for instructions. The tactical teams remained pinned down by organized animal resistance, and the entire Hartwell operation was stalled by the actions of one extraordinary baby and her forest allies. But Zara knew that the real battle was just beginning. As the standoff continued, something extraordinary began to happen. Luna's vocalizations changed to a new pattern. Not the commanding calls she had been using to coordinate the forest defenses, but something softer, more inclusive. The baby began making sounds that seemed to reach beyond the immediate crisis, beyond the fear and conflict that surrounded them. Agent Chen was the first to notice the change. His radio, which had been crackling with urgent tactical communications, suddenly went quiet. "That's unusual," he said, pressing his earpiece. "The Hartwell teams have stopped reporting in." Marcus watched as Luna continued her new pattern of sounds, his face filled with wonder. "She's not just talking to the animals anymore," he said quietly. "She's communicating with the humans, too, somehow reaching past their conscious minds to touch something deeper." From the helicopters overhead, the sound of engines began to change. One by one, the aircraft started moving away from their attack formations, their pilots seemingly no longer interested in pursuing the extraction operation. The tactical teams that had been pinned down by animal defenders were laying down their weapons, their aggressive postures replaced by something that looked remarkably like peace. "This is impossible," Agent Chen breathed, but his own voice had lost its edge of tension. Despite his professional training, he found himself feeling calmer, more centered, as if Luna's sounds were somehow healing divisions he hadn't even known existed in his own heart. The bear cub in Zara's lap nuzzled closer to Luna, and the baby gently stroked its fur while continuing to make her soft, healing sounds. The golden eagle left its perch and soared in graceful circles overhead, no longer serving as a scout, but simply celebrating the beauty of flight. Throughout the forest, the defensive barriers began to dissolve as animals returned to their natural behaviors, though they remained close by, as if reluctant to leave the source of such extraordinary peace. "What is she doing?" Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face as she felt her own anger and fear melting away, replaced by a profound sense of hope and connection. "She's healing," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Luna isn't just communicating with different species. She's helping them remember what they have in common. She's showing them that cooperation is stronger than conflict, that understanding is more powerful than fear." One of the Hartwell helicopters landed in the clearing, but instead of tactical teams, a single man emerged. He was older, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. But as he approached the group around Luna, his expression wasn't one of aggression or determination. It was wonder and something that looked like shame. "My name is Jonathan Hartwell," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on Luna. "I came here to acquire an asset for my corporation. Instead, I find myself face to face with something I never expected. A child who has the power to change everything." Agent Chen stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, but the gesture felt empty and meaningless in the atmosphere of peace that Luna had created. "Mr. Hartwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap a minor and illegal wildlife trafficking." But Hartwell raised his hands, not in surrender but in something closer to reverence. "Agent Chen, I think we're all beyond such concerns now. This child ... He gestured toward Luna, who was continuing to make her soft, healing sounds. "She's shown me something I thought I'd lost long ago, the possibility that power can be used to heal rather than harm. The mother bear approached the group, no longer defensive but curious. She sniffed at Hartwell carefully, then settled down beside him as if accepting his presence. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. If Luna's animal allies trusted this man, perhaps there was hope for a different kind of resolution. "What are you proposing?" Zara asked, though she found herself already knowing the answer in her heart. "A partnership," Hartwell said simply. "My corporation has resources, technology, and reach that could protect children like Luna from those who would harm them. Agent Chen's government division has legal authority and institutional knowledge. Marcus has research expertise and understanding of these gifts, and you, Zara, have something none of us can match. You have Luna's trust and love." Luna made a sound that somehow managed to convey approval, agreement, and joy all at once. The bear cub in Zara's lap clapped its small paws together, while the golden eagle landed on Hartwell's shoulder as if blessing the alliance that was forming. "Together," Hartwell continued, "we could create something unprecedented. A network dedicated to protecting and nurturing children with extraordinary abilities, helping them understand their gifts and use them to heal rather than harm." Marcus was already nodding, his notebook forgotten as he contemplated the possibilities. A school, perhaps. A place where gifted children could learn alongside animals, where they could develop their abilities in safety and peace. With full government protection and corporate resources, Agent Chen added, his professional skepticism giving way to genuine enthusiasm. We could identify other children like Luna before they become targets, provide support for their families, create a community where they belong. But the most important voice in this conversation belonged to Luna herself. The baby looked at each of the adults in turn, then made a series of sounds that clearly expressed her thoughts on their proposal. Around the clearing, every animal present responded with sounds of their own, a chorus of approval that seemed to come from the very heart of the forest itself. "She agrees," Marcus translated, tears streaming down his face. "But she has conditions. The animals must be partners in this venture, not subjects. The children must be taught to use their gifts to protect and heal the natural world. And above all, no child will ever be forced to participate. This must be a place of choice and freedom." Zara looked down at her remarkable daughter, who had transformed a morning of crisis into an opportunity for healing and hope. Luna reached up to touch her mother's face, making soft sounds that needed no translation. They were sounds of love, gratitude, and promise. "Then it's settled," Zara said, her voice strong with determination and joy. "We start building a better world for children like Luna, a world where extraordinary gifts are celebrated rather than feared." As if to seal their agreement, the golden eagle spread its magnificent wings and soared into the sky, circling the clearing before heading toward the horizon. One by one, the other animals began to disperse, returning to their homes in the forest, but carrying with them the memory of this extraordinary day when species barriers had dissolved and hope had triumphed over fear. The bear cub was the last to leave, carefully placing Luna's stuffed toy at the baby's feet before nuzzling both mother and daughter one final time. The mother bear touched her massive paw gently to Zara's shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and friendship that bridged worlds. As the sun climbed higher over the vineyard, casting golden light across the scene of their miraculous morning, Luna made one final sound, a soft, contented coo that seemed to embrace everyone present. In that simple sound was a promise of the future they would build together, a future where children with extraordinary gifts would grow up surrounded by love, understanding, and the knowledge that their abilities were meant to heal the world. The bear cub that had been trapped in a Vineyard Bird-Net had become the catalyst for something beautiful and unprecedented. and the baby who had shocked everyone with her compassion and extraordinary abilities had shown them all that the most powerful force in the world isn't fear or control. It's love, understanding, and the courage to use our gifts in service of others. In the years that followed, the Riverside Valley would become known as a place of healing and wonder, where children with remarkable abilities learned alongside their animal friends, where the natural world and human innovation worked in harmony, and where the memory of one extraordinary morning continued to inspire hope and change. But that is a story for another day. For now, it was enough that a mother and her baby had found their place in the world, surrounded by friends both human and animal, ready to face whatever adventures lay ahead with courage, love, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest among us can change everything. Luna gurgled happily in her carrier, reaching out to touch the faces of her new family, Marcus, Agent Chen, and even Jonathan Hartwell, who had discovered that true power came not from taking, but from giving. The stuffed bear toy sat in her lap, a reminder of the cub who had started it all, and of the extraordinary things that could happen when someone chose compassion over fear. The vineyard stretched peacefully around them, its vines heavy with promise, while overhead the golden eagle continued its graceful flight toward tomorrow. Zara pulled out her phone to call for help, but the screen showed no signal bars. The vineyard's remote location, which usually felt like a blessing, now felt like a curse. She was completely alone with her baby and a trapped wild animal, with no way to contact anyone for assistance. The nearest neighbor was at least 2 miles away, and the local wildlife rescue center was even further. Luna continued to babble softly to the bear cub, her tiny voice creating an odd melody of comfort that seemed to keep the frightened animal calm. Zara watched in amazement as the cub's breathing became less labored whenever Luna made her gentle sounds. It was as if her daughter had some natural ability to communicate with the wild creature. "What am I supposed to do, Luna?" Zara whispered to her daughter, feeling helpless and scared. The bear cub's eyes followed every movement she made, and she could see intelligence there that made her heart ache even more. This wasn't just an animal caught in a trap. This was someone's baby, separated from its family and suffering. Suddenly, a new sound made Zara's blood run cold. From somewhere deeper in the forest beyond the vineyard, she heard a low, rumbling call. It was answered by another call, this one closer. Her hands began to shake as she realized what those sounds meant. The mother bear was looking for her cub, and she was getting closer to the vineyard. The trapped cub's ears perked up at the distant calls, and it began to whimper more urgently, trying to call back to its mother. But the sound that came out was weak and strained, barely audible beyond the immediate area where they stood. Zara knew that if the mother bear couldn't locate her cub, she would become increasingly desperate and dangerous. "We have to help him, don't we, baby girl?" Zara said to Luna, who responded with what sounded almost like agreement. The baby reached out again toward the cub, and this time, something extraordinary happened. The bear cub stretched its neck toward Luna's outstretched hand, and for just a moment the tip of its nose touched the baby's tiny fingers. Zara held her breath, expecting the worst, but instead of aggression, she saw something that brought tears to her eyes. The cub seemed to find comfort in that brief contact with Luna. Its struggles against the net became less frantic, and it looked up at the baby with what could only be described as trust. But their tender moment was interrupted by another sound that made Zara's heart stop completely. The rumbling call of the mother bear was much closer now, and it carried a tone of increasing desperation and anger. Zara estimated the bear might be less than a quarter mile away, moving through the forest that bordered the vineyard. "I have to try to free you," Zara whispered to the cub, her voice shaking with both fear and determination. She carefully approached the tangled net, studying the way it had wrapped around the small animal. The mesh was so tightly wound that she could see it was cutting off circulation in some areas. The cub's left hind paw was already showing signs of swelling. As Zara knelt down beside the trapped animal, Luna leaned forward in her carrier, bringing her closer to the bear cub. The baby made a series of soft cooing sounds, and incredibly, the cub responded with gentle whimpers that sounded almost like conversation. Zara couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Her 8-month-old daughter was somehow communicating with a wild bear cub. "Okay, little guy, I'm going to try to help you," Zara said softly, reaching toward the net with trembling hands. The cub watched her every movement but didn't show any signs of aggression. Instead, it seemed to understand that she was trying to help. The first strand of netting she tried to loosen was wound so tightly around the cub's chest that she was afraid to pull too hard. The thin cord had already created small cuts in the animal's fur, and she didn't want to make the injuries worse. Her fingers worked carefully, trying to find a section of the net that might give way without causing more damage. Luna suddenly made a sharp crying sound, not her usual contented babbling, but an urgent noise that made both Zara and the bear cub look at her in surprise. The baby was pointing past Zara's shoulder toward the edge of the vineyard, her small face twisted with what looked like worry. Zara turned to follow her daughter's gaze and felt her heart nearly stop. Standing at the edge of the vineyard, not more than 50 yards away, was the largest bear she had ever seen. The mother bear stood on her hind legs, sniffing the air and scanning the area with obvious distress. She was massive, easily over 6 feet tall when standing upright, with thick, dark fur and powerful muscles visible beneath her coat. The mother bear dropped back to all fours and began moving slowly toward them, her nose to the ground as she followed her cub's scent trail.